Spearheading the 2024 Rockman X collaboration, it is everyone's favorite blue bomber and iconic Maverick Hunter. It is RMX00 Hunter X, with a kit of full charge, charge buster, shoot boost, biped legs, and the leg ability of charge shot, which buffs the power and success of shooting skills upon a certain Medaforce threshold being met. Now, not only as the very first and most iconic member of the Rockman X collaboration, it is also worth noting that Hunter X is the event reward to be earned through the event as well, which means that even if you fail to collect any of the gacha-based models, this is one that everybody can come home with as a trophy and collect to earn as their reward for participating in the event. And even as an event reward, I have to admit that despite the somewhat lower stats in some areas, it's still a pretty well-rounded and synergized set that anyone can capitalize on almost right out of the gate. Full charge on the head part is a special base skill, so it does not classify in any of the previous types or skill types, that will instead sap the user's HP, head armor by up to 50% to fully cap their Medaforce gauge at 100%. This means that you can instantly use it from turn 2 onwards for an instant Medaforce nuke, or to meet any kind of Medaforce threshold requirements for any part that you may have, such as, say, Beam Sword, Hyper Beam, Ghost, or Ghost Shot, or Microwave, or anything that requires a CG threshold to maintain conditional bonuses or perks. This is a very easy way to capitalize on. Just do be aware, though, that because it does eat head HP, it will kind of leave you pretty squishy towards the later end after you use it, so make sure you have someone on the team that can heal Hunter X to restore that back, or someone that can cover for him long enough to do his job without being sniped too prematurely. Charge Buster on the right arm, and arguably very iconic and incredibly fitting in this case, is a standard conventional shooting attack that has a charge requirement based on Medaforce gauge. It will consume up to about 10 or 5% of the Medaforce chart of the user's Medaforce gauge when used, but it will also get a damage bonus relative to how much charge is in the gauge, plus what they consume upon use. So this already synergizes very well with full charge as pretty much a 2-turn nuke right out of the gate as long as you can maintain it. Plus, since Charge Buster doesn't really have any major penalties on cooldown, it's a pretty reliable skill that you can never really go wrong with using in one form or another. Shoot Boost on the left arm is a support-based skill, and not something you see too terribly often on models like this, but still pretty fitting all the same. Simply explained, it will buff the damage of any shooting type skills of himself and all allies across the team by 50%, as long as the buff remains active. So this will synergize pretty well with himself, as it means he will get an extra damage bonus to Charge Buster, whether or not he has that in his gauge. And it does also mean that in order to use X right out of the gate, it will require a couple turns of setting him up so that he can officially fire off at his fullest capacity. And the leg ability of Charge Shot does also tie into his very synergetic kit as well, as it means he will get a boost furthermore to his success and his power as long as a certain Medaforce threshold is met, which of course can be met pretty easily with full charge. Across the board, even as an event reward, he's actually not too shabby across the board with his numbers, with armor and power and other leg stats. When it comes to armor, he's packing about 3419 for the head, about 3,000 for the right arm, about 3,300 for the left, and about 37, almost 3,800 for the legs. Now with his legs, that does kind of end up being one of his sore spots as well, as he's definitely not going to be the fastest on the field. But it is also worth noting that X never really made a point to be like the fastest or the most broken out of the gate, and instead needs time to like charge, I guess pun intended, in order to reach his fullest potential. With that being said, though, he is packing a base mobility of 682, which isn't terrible, but he is not going to be the fastest on the field, and he most certainly is going to be outrun if there is not somebody that can make him even faster or can possibly supplement that stat. An evade of 868 isn't terrible either, as it means he will have a pretty fair time dodging or grazing incoming attacks. Not the greatest chances there are, but it will be there. A melee resist of 743 isn't super great, as he will most certainly take a lot of extra punish damage from fighting enemies up close and personal, but a shoot resist of 1273, almost 1300, is definitely going to be a strong point for him, as this means he can most certainly hold his own at long range better than he can at close range. All this being said though, as a pure set scorer, I do have to rate Hunter X a pretty solid 6.5 out of 10, and some arguments could possibly talk me even into a 7. Primarily because his kit is very synergetic unto itself. Full charge and shoot boost and charge shot can synergize very well with Charge Buster to make sure that every hit will be as painful as possible, with the highest likelihood of landing hits without anyone dodging or grazing him. The biggest weakness that X has, however, though, is the fact that he doesn't have the best leg stats there is, and he does require at least 2 turns to charge and prep himself before he can actually start fighting. The first turn is, of course, with full charge, which will also trigger charge shot with that, but will also use turn 2 to use shoot boost. Now, once these 2 turns are used, then he can start spamming Charge Buster all he wants, but that's assuming you can get to that point without anyone sniping him too quickly. As mixed parts, I much more confidently have to rate him at a 7 out of 10 across the board, because even if, say, his legs really aren't the greatest there are, or if you choose to mix him up and, say, trade out the left arm and the legs for something more conventional or easier to use, then you can really start cooking with some extra damage across the board depending on how you choose to use X. And it only goes to show that a Medarock crossover actually does tie in with Hunter X very well, because the ability of customization is pretty much one of X's best and most iconic features, as X is not only just his name, but also serves as a reference to the variable that can stand for, quite literally and universally, anything.